Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And this whole week I'm doing Father's Day films, and today I'm doing the 1983 movie, Mr. Mom. Here is your trivia question for today. What was the nickname of the vacuum cleaner? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So in this film, we meet the Butler family, a happy mother and father and their three children. Now, unfortunately, Jack, the father and provider for the family, loses his job at the car assembly factory. After a little bit of not being able to find a new job, Caroline decides it's time for her to get back out into the workforce. So she decides to put her degree to use and get back into marketing. So now it's up to Jack to take over as the happy homemaker. So will Caroline be able to handle being back in the daily grind and, of course, proving herself in this supposed man's world? All the while dealing with sexual advances from her own boss. And on the other hand, will Jack be able to learn how to cook, clean, and watch the children, all the while learning a healthy respect for what his wife actually does, and manage to dodge all the advances he's getting from all of the local women of the neighborhood? This movie was directed by Stan Dragati. Two other potential directors for this film were Ron Howard and Ted Kotcheff. The movie was written by John Hughes. Hughes was originally asked to be the first director for the film, but he declined as his preference was to do a movie in Chicago instead of doing it in Hollywood. Mr. Mom was actually John Hughes' second feature film that he had ever written. The first was National Lampoon's Class Reunion. His third film that he wrote was National Lampoon's Vacation, which actually came out the exact same year as Mr. Mom. Hughes actually based Mr. Mom off of his own experience, as when he left advertising and his wife went back to work, he was watching his two children. One of the scenes in the film that actually did happen to Hughes was the poker scene. This is the sequence where they're using coupons as currency. It's because of this movie that Universal offered Hughes a three-picture deal, which would allow him to create the movies 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Weird Science, which he not only wrote but also directed. Well-known television producer Aaron Spelling was also the producer for the film Mr. Mom. The reason he chose to produce this particular film is he wanted to be a part of something that he could go and watch with his own children. Michael Keaton plays the main character of Jack Butler in this film, and he was so interested in doing so that he actually turned down a starring role in the movie Splash. Apparently, Keaton got the role due to his performance in the movie Night Shift. Other actors that were up for the role of Jack Butler were Chevy Chase, Michael Douglas, Steve Martin, John Travolta, Robin Williams, John Goodman, and George Segal. Terry Garr plays the character of Caroline Butler. Other actresses that were also up for that role were Karen Allen, Jane Curtin, Farrah Fawcett, and Sally Field. Martin Mull plays the character of Ron Richardson. There were some other actors up for that role as well, including Dabney Coleman, Jeffrey Jones, Jack Nicholson, and Burt Reynolds. Here are some other actors and actresses you might recognize in this film: Jeffrey Tambor, Christopher Lloyd, Edie McClurg, Graham Jarvis, and Anne Gillian. The eldest child in the family, Alex, would grow up to be actor Frederick Kohler. The middle child, Kenny, who carries around his blanket named Whoopi, would grow up to be voice actor Taliesin Jaffe, who, if you're really into Dungeons and Dragons, you might also know him from Critical Role. The youngest in the family is Megan, and she was actually played by twins Courtney and Brittany White. While doing advertising for the film, 20th Century Fox actually made Mr. Mom aprons for sale. If you weren't aware, the soap opera that Jack is watching is The Young and the Restless. The year following this film, they tried to make a TV spin-off of Mr. Mom starring Barry Van Dyke, but unfortunately it flopped. Then in 2019, Voodoo actually tried to make a television series of Mr. Mom, which was supposed to be a continuation of the film. Hayes MacArthur was the dad in this, but Andrea Anders was actually supposed to play the character of Megan, all grown up now. Mr. Mom was primarily filmed in California, with a few exterior shots done in Michigan. So when it comes to the film Mr. Mom, this one's interesting. I think it does have a good story, and for the most part it is pretty fun to watch, but there are some parts of it that don't really stand up to the test of time in my opinion. So I think I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. And if you enjoyed Mr. Mom, other movies I recommend checking out are Three Men and a Baby, Parenthood, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Uncle Buck. Now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What was the nickname of the vacuum cleaner? So the vacuum has apparently been given the nickname of Jaws, which does end up being pretty appropriate as it does try to eat up the entire family, including Kenny's Whoopi. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.